Okay, thank you, Andy and Sandeep, and welcome everybody. Quite impressive turnout. It makes me a little nervous. So many people have signed up. I hope that equally many people will sign up for the subsequent lectures as well. Thank you for joining this first lecture on the Data Academy. It's entitled Journal Data and Unlocking the Wealth of Data in the Corpus. I've interpreted it as a lecture about the corpus in the Research Data Platform. There's not really only the data, but the corpus as a whole. And I have entitled my presentation, The Powers of Ent, which I will explain later. So, now rather. So maybe you have seen videos that show the powers of 10 in meters. So you zoom out on a person and then a little bit on the street. If you go further, the city, the whole planet, the entire solar system, the Milky Way, and wider until you see the whole universe. Or you can zoom in all the way down to molecules, atoms, and quarks. I think that's always very fascinating to think in the universe in these powers of 10. Our knowledge graph that we are building in the Research Data Platform is maybe not as big as the universe, but there are also patterns that come about if you zoom in or out. So that's why I thought maybe the way to look at the journal data is by introducing the powers of the entities, the powers of Ent instead of the powers of 10. And this is what I came up with. So let's start in the middle at the sort of human level, in the middle at level 0, 10 entities to the power 0. Those are the exhibits. We will come to that later. If you zoom in from the exhibits, you will find documents that we will talk about. Within the documents, there are occurrences of structural elements like the references, the authors, affiliations, acknowledgements, and so on. If you go deeper, you find fine-grained structure of those occurrences, like a first name, last name, those kind of things. You can go deeper, finding the sections or concept annotations. You can go even deeper with sentences, words, or even bytes, even lower down. So we won't do that. We won't go deeper than -3 today. So after that, I want to go up as well, to go to groupings of works that you only see. So that is not really a belongs to situation, but just patterns that you see in the data. First, you get what I call the vesicles, so those are booklets of some fixed number of works. Then journals, those are ongoing things, and families of journals, the level of what you see at publisher level or ANI database level, and then finally the collections that we have in the Research Data Platform. So that is a bit of the way I want to structure. So today, since the topic is journal data, I will focus mostly on the works. You could do a similar exercise for all the other entities in the data platform as well. So I will, of course, touch on them, but the focus will be on works and how they are organized. So, but maybe there are a lot of people who have joined up who are maybe not really that familiar with the data platform, or maybe new and don't know the Research Data Platform folklore with the words exhibit, occurrence, entity, and so on. So let me spend a small side note. And people who know me, they know that I can do many side notes and even side notes within side notes. I won't do that today. And they have this format. So side note about the RDP folklore. I think this picture tells us the core of what exhibit, occurrences, entities are in a very quick way. So first of all, the exhibit is the photograph that you see here. So actually this is me when I got my PhD thesis. On the left-hand side, you see my PhD advisor. He'll come back in the presentation later still. It is evidence that these 4 people exist, or 4 people, 5 people. What is it? So there is a face recognition going on. Let's call it an entity extraction of 4 occurrences of the person entity. So on this one exhibit, you find 4 occurrences of a certain entity, or maybe 5. There is always a probabilistic side to it. You see the 5th is the picture, maybe the painting at the back, and maybe you could even argue it is a person or was a person. So that is already a probabilistic part number 1. And then we try to match and link this to our existing well, let's say reservoir of entities that we know of, the registered entities. They all have an ID already. So we say, oh, this person is this entity, this person maps to that entity. So that is our matching and linking. And if we can't match or link, we cluster them together, all the ones we didn't match or link. So that is the next step. Even that happens with a certain precision and recall with a certain accuracy. So each of these steps add a certain layer of probability. An important thing that should never be forgotten is that those occurrences are different from the entities in that the occurrences are grounded in time. So you see here a picture of me when I was only, well, how old was I? It was in 1991. And the nice thing is I look very much like my father. So maybe you thought it was the guy on the right-hand side, but it is the second person, that's me. So occurrences are grounded in time, whereas we need to map them to a representation of the world of research today. So there are, you can't really same as one to the other. They have their own life, they have their own graph. Occurrences and entities. Exhibits are proof that an entity exists. Occurrences you extract from them, and subsequently you create the entities, an abstract representation of the world of research, which is the objective of the research data platform. So this will start our journey through these powers, the powers of the entities. So let's start, as I said, with 0. And on the left-hand side, you will see all the time where we are in the journey, as a kind of a reminder of where we are. So exhibits, what are they? So those are the materials that we acquire from a wide range of sources. We can get them from websites, we can get documents, XML documents, PDF files, Word documents, anything that might be useful to give us an information about the entities that we need to have in our research data platform. And the research data platform, as I said, is there to build a representation of the world of research. So it is, for a large part, the documents will be journal articles or scientific output, research output that researchers produce. Every exhibit can be the evidence for 0 or more entities. So it can happen that we get some material in. Maybe a purist say that they can't call it an exhibit because it doesn't prove anything. I'm a mathematician, so we always start with 0. Again, 0 or more entities can be on it. You saw that the picture too, there are 4 people there. And an exhibit can also give rise to the existence of multiple entity types. For instance, if you have a journal article, it is an entity in itself, the work, the scientific output, but in it you will find author names, affiliations, which all indicate other entities in existence. So an exhibit is the exhibit often of many, many entities. And what is really important is this word exhibit emphasizes a different way of how we look at the incoming content and data. In the old world with OpsBank, ZOX, MHub, which we are replacing, we saw this as a piece of content that came in that made it all the way to the product Scopus and underwent various enrichments. First we structure it, then we add some more information, then we add the author IDs and reference targets, then we add even more. So more and more and more gets added, and finally it ends up. So this is the mental model that we used to have of a record that grows and gets more enriched. This is no longer the case. We now need to sever the relationship with what comes in and what we finally see on the website. It's better to see these things as two entirely different things. We create evidence based on a lot of material, and that gives the likelihood of the existence of a real world object. In some cases, it's very clear that it exists because we have received an article from the publisher itself. So maybe there's a pretty good argument to say that work exists. In other cases, we simply only know that it is being referred to in other articles. We didn't have the original yet. So it's also pretty strong evidence because many people perhaps are referring to it, but we didn't see the thing itself yet. So all these things count as evidence for an entity. So in a sense, that is somewhat shocking. The exhibits are, in a sense, the only real things we have in possession. Those are the files that we get in, as it were. Because when we say that we create a person entity, it's a bit of a stretch to say that it is a real person. It's only what we think it may be a person who exists, but it is not a live and real flesh and blood person at all. And deeper down, also, if you go to the powers minus, the negative ones, you will see there is a lot of interpretation in it, in XML or in other ways. That is really interpretation of that data. It can be wrong in various ways, but that we either have made ourselves or that others have made previously. So this is an important thing to realize. So if we go one level up, that is they often go hand in hand, 0 and 1. Then we get to the level of the entities. That is really what everything is about. Now, in the preparation of this presentation, I already noticed that even though we all use the word entity in the research data platform, even my closest colleagues have a different definition of it. So fortunately, I am the professor here, or how do I call myself, the lecturer, so I can determine what the entities are. And I'm the first one, that's good too. So the core entities of the research data platform are works, person, organization, funding, sources. We have a few others as well, and concepts and so on, but I can't get into them all unless you give me the chance of coming back various times. I can speak for hours and hours. An important entity that I want to mention that is not in our usual list, that's why I listed it here. We have a few of those too, like country. Country is not, you don't see it in the diagrams of the domain. Nevertheless, we treat it, and we should treat it as a country, as an entity in its own right, meaning that we want to map other entities to a country, like an article from which country does it attribute to, or maybe what people came from which country. So those entities also exist in our data platform. And as I said before, the person, organization, funding, and so on have their own powers of that we could do with plus and minus. And maybe that's an interesting exercise to work that out in detail another time. So these entities are abstract contracts emerging to the evidence posed by the occurrences, as I said. They are grounded in time, and the entities and their relationships form our knowledge graph, our representation of the world of research. So now I wanted to show you a few examples, and that I have lots of examples that I could show you of those exhibits or entities, especially of the works. Now I feel a little, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but I know that I'm surrounded by hundreds of people here, 128 at the moment, who sometimes know far more than me about journal data. So nevertheless, let me give you a few examples here. And there is so much to tell that we could easily spend the entire hour about it. This is an article of a preprint from Archive. And this is a preprint from my PhD thesis advisor called Dirk Siersma. So what you see here, the title, the name, author name. So there's evidence of that Dirk, my thesis advisor, exists. There is an institute mentioned here. Here's the abstract, a little summary of the information. There are the author keywords, you can see them here. And then there is the whole article. Now, maybe if you haven't really looked at many articles or preprints before, then I encourage you to just do that. And maybe I was thinking that maybe could be the homework for today even, that you take 10 minutes in the coming week to look up a few articles and write down the things that you find odd. That's the important thing here. That's also what I'm going to do now. So if I want you, before I go to the next one, note a few things. So here there is vertically, it says 24th of November 2017. So that is almost exactly 5 years ago. This is when this article was submitted or deposited, I would say, on Archive. So another thing that I wanted to show you here that is quite relevant, even though maybe you think why, is that there is no comma between the city, Utrecht, and the country, the Netherlands. And then there is something else that I want to show here. The keywords are Milner fiber equipment. That is the keywords that the author provided. Now let's have a look where that article ended up. So here we see the article on Science Direct. So now it is published. It was accepted and published. How can we see that it is accepted? Well, it says so here on the Science Direct page. So it says it was received by the journal on the 24th of January, or a little later than, well, I don't know if these dates come up. So there was a revision was there, and it was accepted at the 17th of July 2017. It then became available online on the 24th of November, and the version of record appeared on the 29th of November. So the available online, and so the article in press appears. That is the first version of the article. You see it's quite soon after it was accepted, and then a little later it is proofread and so on, and it becomes a version of record. However, if you see the issue, it appears in the issue volume 234 on the 1st of February 2018. So that was in the next year. So there are many dates associated to this article. It's already quite interesting, the version of record is. And now what is important is that if you want to roll up articles for a year, for instance, which articles appeared in the year 2018, does it belong to 2018 here, or is it 2017? Which year is it? Now the problem with Scopus today is that it is both. The moment it is not yet in print, it has this date, and the moment it appears in the issue, it switches to this date, meaning that this article counts twice in the rankings, once in 2017, and it counts another time in 2018. It is not right, simply because we cannot properly store it. Another thing that you might notice, I showed you this comma here. So there is now a comma, hey, there's a comma between Utrecht and the Netherlands, but there is now also a comma here between the postcode and Utrecht. That's not really the way we write postcode in the Netherlands, but nevertheless, it is understandable. Another thing that I want to show you here is that the keywords are still Milner fiber. Oh, that is nice, they are there. But let's look at Scopus now. In Scopus, we have a few disappointments. First of all, yeah, I can't show you that really very well, but there is just one date, that is this issue date, the 1st of February 2018. And until the time it was in the issue, it was the previous date, as I said. Another thing that you see is that there's somewhat kind of a mockery of formulas, because in Scopus there is no room for MathML. Here you see that you shouldn't confuse titles and all these things, but some people call that metadata. I'm not so happy with that. For me, the metadata is the time when the article was, of the file was there, or the provenance, or who processed it, or which steps. Not really this. This is the bibliographic data. It's part of the data itself, the content itself. So this can't be. It should be represented in the way the author meant to be. Now, this is not really that spectacular formula, but if I had more time, I could show you formulas that are quite distorted in, or even in abstracts, it's shown as formula omitted. So here suddenly the keywords are in alphabetical order. So I don't really know why that is, but that is the way the content in Scopus is organized. The keywords are in alphabetical order, and that is, you could say, who cares? Well, I think the author cares. The author made a judgment. The Milner fiber is really the most important keyword for this article, and that got lost here. It's now even at the end. And finally, I wanted to say there is here now suddenly even one comma extra. So now we started with no comma. The word the has disappeared, and there are extra commas. So what does it actually mean? So later I will share with you a nice page on Confluence that you may have seen. There's this page here. It has all the links to the Café API that the SOX team created. So you can use it if you know the right ID, that's the thing here in bold, to open the underlying files, and you see everything is accessible. The ANI record, the author profile, the institute profile, the source record, patent office files, you name it. everything is there, including even the open access information. So if we do that for this particular article that we just looked at, won't bore you with XML files too long. This is the only one that I show you. And you see here that what happened halfway through the process is that TA, which is part of the postal code, came to be a state. That is why the comma is there. So it's really interesting if you want to get real connected with the data to look at it and then to try to find the corresponding files and see what's going on and why it may have gone on. And then there are many things you can wonder, like I did, why are suddenly the keywords in alphabetical order? So it has destroyed the meaning of the article. Similarly, those dates, we can't provide the correct listings of articles for a certain year for our customers. This is what I wanted to say about this first article. Let's go to another kind of exhibit. But this is something completely different. This is a patent. We also get tens of millions of patents. It's another example of a thing that we come in. So at first glance, maybe it looks very different, but interestingly, it is on the one hand very different, but there's also a lot of similarity. So here we have a title, we have people associated it, they are not the authors, but they are inventors. There's also some other, sometimes there's a person too who gets assigned this patent. Here are some numbers that I don't know what they mean. And we have colleagues here who know this. You get some related publications. Hey, there is an abstract even, so a summary of what goes on. And then if we scroll further, there is a title, and actually it looks quite like a journal article, as you can see. So on a certain level, it is different, but on another level, I think there's also a lot of similarity. There are acknowledgements, there are title, abstracts, names associated, maybe not authors. There are places where these people work, affiliations, all this exists even in a patent. And then finally, let's look at one more example, and then I go on with my presentation. So here we have an article from Japan, the Japan Journal of Logopedics and Phoniatrics. Now, this is, I think, a nice article. And if you look up the DOI, in Scopus, we put the DOI like this, but as you can see, I forgot to say that the DOI, everybody else nowadays writes the DOI like this as a full-fledged URI. So then you can click on it and jump to it. So the HTTPS DOI.org, the DOI organization, has requested to put it in front of the, you can say 10.16 is the DOI proper. Would be so easy if it would both work on Scopus, one and the other, because if you cut and paste, it says you can't find within Scopus. The DOI is always the pure DOI because purity apparently counts. So here we have the article in Japan. If you follow this DOI, and you have to prepend it with HTTPS DOI.org, then you get to this article. Well, actually, you get the Japanese version first. You can here switch to the language. This is a bilingual journal on JStage. So this is interesting. We see the same kind of problems if I had time to show you that, for instance, the keywords are in an alphabetical order in the Scopus, but not here. But interestingly, there are 6 references here. You see, some are in Japanese. So not much likelihood that those are in Scopus. And indeed, if you look in Scopus, then you'll see that there is just one reference. So in the past, what used to be the rule for Scopus, the processing rule, was that if a what they call non-Roman character appeared in the references, it was to be omitted in processing. So that means that in the Scopus version, and that we have in our data platform, we have just one reference, but in the JStage version, the original article, we have 6 references. And the second one is the one that left off. All the other ones have a Japanese or Chinese character inside. Now, interesting thing is that you have all seen the demos and the presentations about the Cabinet Office, the work that we did for the job was to combine the J-stage data with the Scopus data. There is always an element of things that we don't have yet and an overlap. And this is an overlap. Now we have the same article in our own data platform, in this format and in this format. Now the question is, how many references does this article really have? Well, 6 obviously, even though the Scopus content only has 1. So this poses a problem. You see that evidence, in the world of, in the old world, where we said we have enriched data, then we spoke of duplicates. So I think duplicates gives a really negative connotation in a way. No, duplicates are good when it comes to evidence. You want to have as much evidence as possible, and evidence, as you know, must not be tampered with. So you need to leave it intact as much as possible. So there is no reason why OpsBank should deduplicate. It should leave. OpsBank is the place for all our exhibits. We have as many as possible, and then we take the richest possible version for our customers. That is our goal. So here you see some of the things. And we have that for other content too. I could show you journals that appear on Medline and in Scopus, and we get it from multiple sources. We need to have as much evidence as possible. So I hope this gave you a little bit of a picture of the kind of articles that we have. We started with the preprint, and I should note that in our opinion, and preprint is a different work than the article that came out of it. So the preprint is not yet accepted. It is often is different even. We have an example journal article. I'll show you about the dates. We have a patent, something completely different. If I had more time, I could have shown you an awarded grant document, and you could see how that looked like. Even that has a title and a description, what you could call an abstract. All these things follow exactly the same pattern. So one thing about the references. So this was the main topic here, that there were too many references. I'll now switch back to my presentation, but first we do another side note. So if I had more time, or now I can keep saying I had more time, what I really would have loved is to create some kind of nice jingle that comes when there is a side note jargon watch. So one thing that now we are here in the data platform, and we are in a data academy lecture, let me tell you proper jargon. Many people make the mistake of calling a reference a citation. They say, oh, this article, the Scopus record had 1 citation and the Japanese version had 6 citations. No, the correct word is references. They are pointing out citations in our world is the ones that come in. So on average, if you go to Peter Bergman's wonderful report of counts that everybody should know of, the average number of references in an article is 29, and the average number of citations, that is the number of times it is cited by other articles, is 11. The fact that it can be a lot less is just because of the fact that many of the references point outward out of the corpus. And some disciplines changes very differently. Some have in arts and humanities, there are many more references that go outside than, for instance, in physics, has to do with our coverage, in fact. And then there is another metric that's called the field-weighted citation index. It sometimes helps to adjust for citation patterns in different disciplines. So here, the reason why this is so incredibly important is because of the difference between the capability and the data product. So the reference matcher that does all these references and tries to find the destination is about references, but nobody is interested in clicking on a reference. Our customers are interested in knowing how often this article is cited. So the data product is not about a whole data set with targets. It is about articles with incoming articles. How many articles? That is what the quality should be about. And if you're responsible for a reference matcher, then you can easily ignore all the references that happen to be missing, like the 5 that were missing just now. But if you say, well, no, my data product is the best possible experience, all those articles that should have been referred to have to be referred to. So then suddenly you realize that all these things are related. You cannot say completeness is somebody else's problem. It's all one important thing if you think in terms of data products. This was my side note for the moment. Let's go one level deeper, because we have to finish on time. So we go -1. And just to end with something I put here in gray, just be pleased with me that I put here a true minus sign and not a hyphen. And if you go to our websites, even though there is so much work on UI and UX, the most elementary typographical errors are made. And I think that if we are the biggest scientific publisher in the world, we should make no mistakes in typography. And that includes hyphens. That shouldn't be hyphens, but n dashes or minus sign. So in my list of -5 to +6, I use the real minus sign. But that is only an extreme side note. So why is the -1 document level there? First of all, as I said, an exhibit can have more than one entity on it. And that is even the case with works. You can have a PDF file that contains, for instance, an article with its errata, or you can have a book review with another book. A lot of things are possible. So first you get this file in from some source, and then you have to look at it and discern the individual articles themselves. In all the examples that I just gave, there was just one example, but one of the takeaways of today is that by just looking at a few examples, don't think that you saw the whole world, because there are so many more examples that will disprove your assumption. Never assume is, after all, the motto. And all these documents, whatever shape or form they have, maybe not in the same sequence, they have the following structural elements. And that is the main job of the document domain, is to take out those structural elements. The title, or maybe you could say multiple titles like in another language, and so on, of all these things that I mentioned, the entities, the journals, all the stuff that I mentioned, we should distinguish different types, different times, different. So I think that I consider that as a sort of standard for everything. So here also there can be different titles, but the core is a title. There are persons, you could say, or let's say authors, who created that document. There are a number of affiliations telling where these authors came from. There's some kind called we call an abstract, or maybe some summary or description. There are index terms of various natures. There is a body, which I put here with big letters because that is something really big, but in the world of the data platform, we often don't look at the body so carefully, because it's often about the bibliographic heart of the data, which is these things are the acknowledgements, in which include the funding. And then there are certain declarations in which I include, let's say, copyright information. What is the license? What can we do with this article? What do the authors have a conflict of interest? All these things are somewhere in the article. And then there are the bibliographic references, and as we just knew, don't call them the citation. So this coarse grain structure is applicable to many of our content types. In general, we can't keep the body part, but we have it in the beginning for some open access content or certain regulations with other publishers. We have it for forever, but in some cases we have to discard of it after 6 months or so, or some agreed period. Nevertheless, we can we use it to create concept annotations or do classifications. That is possible, but in general we look at these everything except the body. And the format of choice here is the content profile, link data, canvas with the annotations. I'll come back to that later. So we want to step away from the ANI schema, and you can say, well, why is he so dismissive? It's easy to be dismissive of other people who create the ANI schema. Well, the full disclosure, I was myself responsible for the ANI schema, so I can be as negative about it as I wish. Let's go one level deeper. That is the occurrences of the structural elements. So they are inside the document. So that is now finally we were on the document level. You may have thought when I showed all these examples that you were already on the correct level, but no, that was only the exhibit level. And we first detected on that exhibit just one work. That was our document. And within that document, we saw a number of things. We saw the bylines, that means written by, who wrote the article. a byline. The affiliation strings, bibliographic references, and so on. So now it's already, I think one important thing is that these bylines are not the same as a list of authors. Affiliations is not the same as a list of organizations. And the bibliographic references, even they are not a list of references. They are textual elements. That is very important. Let's start with the titles and the abstract. Those you have seen many times, but I still wanted to say one more time, there is markup in a title. And if we copy the title in some JSON file or whatever, that is really not, you can do that, but maybe for indexing purposes or something like that. But when we display the article or when we hand it to other people, it should be the way the author has intended. The whole meaning of this title gets destroyed if we take out the mathematics. And it's even worse if you see this abstracts, because this is actually laughable. It says correct equations are as follows, formula omitted. So I don't know. I think that's shameful that we have things like this. So this is level -2, and I have a few more slides about level -2. So here I'm going to look at the bylines. So the bylines are authorships. So who wrote, maybe somebody can put a microphone on mute. So we have, and here my message is, there is a lot of variation. Just thinking that you saw a few examples may not tell you the whole story. Here you see, and I will go to it quickly, and don't look at these things too literally and not too long. So here people have added their full titles, or even how well they got their PhDs. Another thing that you may not realize is that even in a name, you can have a markup. So this is Garcia Bolos. That's a Spanish name, and in Spain you can abbreviate it with G and then subscript A. The fact that you don't see that often doesn't mean it doesn't occur. If you know about it, you can find lots of examples quickly. And then there are people in the author field that are not even authors. This is the Cardiorenal Trialists Consortium. I have a few more examples. Here you see an example from a journal, and these people are in bold lettering. So what does that mean? It means the authors share co-first authorship. So that has become popular in the last 5, 6, 10 years maybe already, that you say, well, I don't want to be the only first author. Now, maybe you can say, how is that possible? If you put them in a sequence and the second is second. No, this is gives weight to these 3 people are equally important. They both want to be first place. We can't do that in our data right now because the first is the first, but this is a need that users have to be able to distinguish themselves. And also you see in that example that this is written on behalf of the AGA clinical guideline. That is some kind of a consortium of some society, guidelines committee. And that you need to be able to capture. In the Science Direct data, you can capture on behalf of. In the Scopus data that we have, it's currently not possible. We have anonymous authors, and if you go to data that we acquire, and this data was acquired from Science Direct to be precise, you see these weird things in the data where obviously something has gone horribly wrong, and all the first names have become initials. So all this thing you can expect in the data. So now let me just say, maybe you wonder, if you have all these problems, what is your solution for it? You're saying it can't be done in the ANI schema. We can't have co-first authors in the ANI schema. So how can we do it then? Now, here's the answer. This is the content profiles linked data standard. And I call that from tagging to real tagging, putting a tag on top of it. That is symbolized on the left-hand side. So what you do is you keep the article as it is. The topic is not to transform, but to preserve as much as you can. And then start pointing at things and say, well, I think this is an author, or I think this, whoever thinks. So you put it with the right provenance. And there can be multiple assertions about the same thing. You can say, I think it's an author, but maybe somebody else said, this is not an author. Or I think this is the University of Harvard, and somebody else said. So you can have these things side by side. So you can have multiple realities, not just one. And you can retrieve the way the data was. And this is the core of the content probability. There's a canvas in HTML5, contains the content, and there are lots and lots of mini graphs, and they are in the form of JSON link data. So that's really important that they are in links, but even more important that they are mini. They are not called mini graphs for no reason. They have to be very, very small and really only say something concise about a certain thing. Unfortunately, what we see in the data platform is that actually the graphs that we communicate among each other are not really that mini. And the nice thing about mini graphs is if you do them well, they can be uniquely defined by a purpose. What are they for? For instance, I'm indicating, if you want to indicate that there are 3 first authors, you can create, and this is the first author mini graph. So this is one, and this third person is also a first author. So that is the purpose. What does it do? Then you can say the provenance. Who told us this? That was Rob's opinion, and maybe somebody else's opinion is that it isn't the case, or this was the previous publisher's opinion, that this was a book review, but we don't believe it's a book review. It is something else. We think that the capital of Seoul is the capital of South Korea, but maybe in the data it said the capital of North Korea. That happens a lot, that it is put in the wrong country, and rather than to throw it away, we can give multiple meanings of the same thing. So this comes from a presentation from Rinke. I encourage you to see. So this is tagging, so putting tags inside and therefore only allowing one reality. You can't tag something that isn't there. So one of the most important things is, I call that respect for zero, or as I was told, maybe I should have called that respect for absence. So you have to say something is not really possible with tagging with tags in XML. This is real text putting on top of it. So I think that's the future of the way how we deal with our documents. Lastly, in the level -2, we look quickly at affiliation strings. We see here that also comes in many ways. And especially wanted to draw attention to the third one in view of the time. So this is that is an article without an affiliation string at all. So that is you just see Tom Schupnel at the top. Now, somewhere at the very end of the article, there's a little bio. It says that Tom is the administrator of surgical and emergency services at Children's Memorial Hospital. So this article doesn't have an affiliation string, but nevertheless, the affiliation is declared. So sometimes you have to look a little further to see what you need to have. So here another jargon watch. In the case of affiliations, we talk in terms of attribution. Attribution means whether an article counts for a certain organization. Does it count for Harvard, or does it count for the Netherlands? This is what you want to know. And if you're that organization or that country, you want to get all the articles that belong to you, no matter what. So it doesn't even matter if the affiliation is correctly structured or not. The question is, do they get what they need? So again, you have a difference between the data capability, the matching, that's about matching the affiliation, and there is the data product that says, well, do I get all the things that are attributed to me? Maybe there is no affiliation, but then I ask you the question, if there is no affiliation, but we know that the author has worked there throughout their careers, should it count? Of course it should count, because we know it, or at least it should be done with the right probability. That's what the data scientists should find out. How probable is that? So if you look at it this way, you see that the data products give you a completely different perspective than you had before. So let's quickly go a little deeper. -3, I don't want to go any deeper. This is the very detailed annotation of the bylines, first name, last name. I mentioned that before, so I don't have examples for that. I just wanted to say, well, maybe you didn't know that I have about 3.6 authors per article and 1.65 affiliations per article. But even that is deceiving, because you have the so-called kilo papers that have thousands of articles. Maybe somebody can put their on mute, please. Yep. Oh dear.
Bogdan?
Could Bogdan please mute?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I don't think that he is hearing it. I'll just try to go. From now on until the end of the hour, top of the hour, I will quickly go through the positive levels, the positive powers, and those are groupings that you see if you zoom out. You take some distance and then further and further, and then you see patterns appearing. The first thing you see is vesicles to appear. That's a word, a little bit of old-fashioned word that means a fixed group of articles, a bounded family of words. And that can be different things, volume issues. And I don't know if I mentioned that, but if you looked at that example that I showed first in the topology and expertise, this article belonged to both an issue and a virtual special issue. That is a group of articles that together are about some kind of a topic. So our works can belong to multiple such structures at once. There can be issues in progress. Those are the articles that have been accepted or that are versions of record, but the issue is not complete. That is exactly that difference that I showed you, 2017, and then the whole article only appeared on the 1st of February. Books, conference proceedings, they fall in this level too. But also smaller groups that we can't really support very well in the data right now, but you could do that with our minigraph, little article groups, like the article plus its preprint. Articles and preprint are two different works, but it's useful to relate them. Article with an erratum that appeared about it, that's a link that we do have. Articles with comments, sets of books, all these things I think are useful data model additions that we can have. A few trivia, I can't say them all. I think an important thing is these issues, they are the editor's intellectual property. In some cases we need books because one often heard comment of the areas of law, of arts and humanities, that sort of thing. Most of the scientific discourse takes place in books rather than journal articles. We have about 300K in our corpus. We have about 150K conference proceedings and 11 million conference papers. So it's quite sizable because the total corpus is about 90 million conference papers in total, of which 11 conference papers. Let's go up one more level. These are the unbounded families of work. So this is a way where I look at can say, well, why don't you call it a journal? Well, there are journals, book series, conference series. Those things is what I have in mind. Often they have an ISSN. A conference series already somewhat special because conferences, they usually, well, not usually, they sometimes shop around, by which I mean, if you have an annual conference of toenail research, let's say, then the 25th annual conference might be published in a book. The 26th annual conference in the next year can be in a journal issue. So the organizers, they get in touch with different publishers and different. So these conference series full a string through our data, and not through the works, but also through these blocks of works. So that is very interesting. And the sources level that we have in our data platform is on this level. So we have around in the world about 100K peer-reviewed journal. So that is don't have as many as in Scopus. I'll come to that. All these journals, as you know, they evolve over time. Borderlines are not that clear, as I just said. And traditionally, you have a fixed number of volumes and issues per year. If you go one level up still, then you get into families of journals, like all journals in a certain discipline, ACG code, or journals that follow a certain style or with a certain publishing model, like hybrid, open access. That is something on a slightly higher level. And just to see again the order of magnitude in the research data platform, we have about 7,000, as even a conservative number of publishers. Order of journals is maybe 40 to 50,000. So that means if publishers were really, really strict, then and they had just one journal style for all their document types, then there would already be 7,000 styles to take care of if you want to automate its processing. But in fact, most of the journals are different, and then within the journals there are countless article types. So this is a huge undertaking to try and get this organized. So +5 are the publishers. This is where these publishers get together. The entirety of Medline is part of our corpus. Important to know that the Elsevier journal data set is not a subset of the corpus collection, because the Scopus collection, as I come in the next slide, is selected by a selection board, and there are journals, even Elsevier journals, that are not in Scopus. So every year there are new journals. If you want to see an order of magnitude there, 250 journals year to date this year alone were added. and also 20 journals change hands from one publisher to the other. Another interesting thing is that those selection policies are not always the same, and that's especially critical for when we have a journal that we want to take out of because of some conflict or some predatory publishing. Maybe Medline disagrees. So is it then part of the Scopus collection or not? Because Scopus, Medline is after all a subset. Those are the kind of things we have to be able to capture in our data. Finally, we come to the highest level. This is the named content and data collection. Here we have the Scopus collection, but also things like the Cabinet Office collection, the Egyptian Knowledge Bank collection. The Compendex collection is not really right now in the data platform. We should pretend it is. So all these things are collections. The definition of a collection is that there's a consistent data set where a published policy exists, and there are quality agreements about the things inside. Every collection adheres to 4 policies: selection policy, coverage policy, process display policy. Selection is what is in or out. Then once you have a journal in or a set in, you say these and these types we cover. This is how we process them.
Nu e cu baterie, e legat cu...
Apologies. So and then we say how it should be displayed. And there is a board called the Scopus Content Selection Advisory Board that decides whether or not journals are in scope. And that is a periodical book series journal, and then within a certain time range or multiple time ranges. And we get about 3,500 title suggestions every year. So finally, I wanted to say the last thing about the named content and data collection that's relevant for everybody in the research data platform. So these collections, they overlap, but not fully. So the reason why the Cabinet Office of Japan is interested is because they want to do additional, they want to let Japanese research be represented in the evaluation system as much as the Scopus content. So some of that content isn't there. So the union of Scopus and CEO is interesting for them, or maybe a part of the Scopus collection plus CEO. Things like research indicators depend on the collection, because the moment you put this other extra content in, then there will be more links. There will be, even the Scopus articles will get more citations from within CAO, and the CAO data may get citations from Scopus. Those were previously unresolved references. And then a completely different view is when you go to the intersection. So this intersection here, those are the articles that are in both in Scopus and CAO. So certainly we have multiple exhibits with different nature that we have to match together, because there is just one entity. We don't say these are two, this is the same entity, but with multiple exhibits. And then we have to take on board that these licenses may not allow us to give all the information that we got, because there can be a contract of an agreement with the people who sourced us this data. So when we create our context view, a word that I didn't mention yet, is when we take the canvas and all these mini graphs together from all these exhibits that we have and want to create a presentable view for the customer, then it has to fit with all these criteria. For Scopus, there can be one reality. For CAO, there can be another reality. Can we, for Scopus, use the fact that there were 6 references in the data? Yes, that is allowed. We are not allowed to show them, but we could use that in our process. And we can also allow, we can also do the following, that we say, well, the fact that we know that this person wrote these 2 articles, if that is a reason why we can say this is one and the same person that we didn't know that based on the evidence in Scopus alone, then we are allowed to conclude that for Scopus and CAO, because in total the important is that the entities match whatever you do. Somebody even in CAO, they need to be able to jump to the Scopus collection at all times. Now this was a race through the data. I don't have the I took you all the way from level 0 and 1 and -1, then down to the level -3 and back up again. And we saw the entire universe of the named data collection. We started with the real evidence, the exhibits. You learned about the exhibits, the occurrences, and so on yet again. I hope that you could see the patterns that exist in the data. if you want to do something with this, I would recommend you also roam around on Science Direct to start with. Take a few random articles, try to find its correspondent Scopus article, look at what is strange about it, or maybe not, and write it all up. Try to look up the original XML file or whatever it is, or the Scopus data, to see what could be the cause that this is the case. So I had at one point taught the story of the data platform with the picture of my 7 grandmothers. I recommend that you see that recording one more time to see the total picture in a different way of what our, in an essence, our objective is. But that is also part of the folklore. So I would like to thank you all for listening to this first lecture. Please use, as Andy said, the IDP Academy, Data Academy Slack channel for any old questions. You can also contact me directly. I'm happy to answer them all. I'm also very happy if we have further sessions after the main lessons, lectures are over, the 4 or 5 that are coming, to have more smaller working groups about certain topics. And I also especially would like to thank a few people who helped me a lot creating this deck. With this, I wanted to end. It's precisely 3 o'clock here in the Netherlands. So thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll see you back in the next Data Academy lecture. Thank you.